So at the core, number searches for a model of the relationship between human and cosmos. And that's how the ancients used it. They looked at numbers like Pythagoreans or the Platonic school. They looked at numbers as something sacred, something that could bring the relationship between human and cosmos. Versus the number, how it's used today in modern terms, like for power's sake, which has always been used for power's sake also, but civilizations use number more materialistically anyway. They use number for military and politics and economics. There's also been always a more sacred approach as well, showed by the philosophers. So then number, in a more sacred sense, in a more symbolic sense, focuses on a constant reality, like a reality that never changes. Not the material reality, but that which they say, that which always is and never becomes. This eternal reality, which we could call God, represented by zero. As opposed to the material but illusory world of phenomena, that which is always becoming but never is. Which is usually represented by the square, but really could be any shape. But most often they use it as the square is the most earthy shape. And that's why in the ancient science of astrology they begin with a circular template and then divide that by 12. And then within that 12 you could draw different shapes and different aspects, and that's where you get the aspects of astrology and the different shapes and different polygons. So in a way, 12 is a number that mediates between heaven and earth, and we often see that in mythological stories like Hercules and his 12 labors as he's trying to atone for his sins, and the 12 tribes of Israel, and the 12 apostles of Jesus. So 12 is a number that mediates between heaven and earth. Mathematically, the mediation between heaven and earth is represented as the squared circle. So we have a square and a circle both with the same circumference, which could only be achieved through pi, through the number pi, the ratio of the circle's circumference to its diameter, used for thousands of years by most civilizations as the number, or as a fraction 22 over 7, 22 divided by 7, which brings a very close approximation to pi. To construct the 22 over 7 squared circle, we need a 3, 4, 5 Pythagorean triangle. 3, 4, 5 that brings us back to 12. 3 plus 4 plus 5 being 12, and then 3 times 4 being 12, and times 5 being 60. And from there you get your two main numbers that civilizations have been using for a very long time, since the ancients. 12 and 60 used all the time, even today used in maps when we divide the 360 degrees by 12, and then you get 60 minutes and 60 seconds within those. With the same thing with clocks, and also, of course, astrological wheels. The astrological wheel, strictly symbolically here, the 0 that you see on the Fool, the 360 degree circle divided by 7, which we see in the Chariot, which represents civilization and life here on Earth. The dimension we are here on Earth is very 7 oriented. But this 360 degrees divided by 7 gives us the only irrational number if you divide 360 by any of the 10 major aspects. Only 7 will give it an irrational number. And in a way it's symbolically related to pi. The heptagon, the 7-sided polygon, still we haven't discovered how to construct a perfect one by hand. 7 is considered a number that neither generates nor is generated, but nevertheless we see it everywhere in the world. Like the 7 days of the week, and 7 notes on a musical scale, and 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 ages of man, 7 degrees within the quadrant of a lunar month, and the 7 pillars of initiation, and the 7 pillars of wisdom, and almost the endless counts of 7s in the book of Revelation. 7 is the number that the world that we live in we most resonate with. This is our number here in the world. It comes after the fall. It comes after the number 6 in the Garden of Eden, after the fall, and comes before the connection to spirit, the communion with spirit. And also mnemonically, the higher octave of 7, which is 14, brings the middle of the pi sequence in the tarot deck. So the numbers 13, 14, 15, if you cut down in the middle of 13, the death card, you have 3 and then 0.1415, 31415, which is pi. So if you have the cards 13, 14, 15 next to each other, you have the beginning of the pi sequence. interestingly enough, it begins with the cutting down the middle of death, and it's in a way, to access pi, it's sort of a half death. You have to, there's a spiritual motivation into finding pi, into squaring the circle. These are all things that were achieved thanks to spiritual and philosophical understandings, and it demands a sort of death of the self and a rebirth of the self in order to access the number pi, in order to access the information that is within pi. So that's why we have in the tarot, straight at the middle of death, that's where pi begins, at 3.1415. And the next card being Temperance, the angelic card, and the card after that, 1-5, the demonic card, the devil. The two extremes of a higher spiritual dimension, the angelic and the demonic.